Welcome to our webinar, Improving Tendering Process in Contracting. Mr. Farhan Aftab is a seasoned professional, having more than 25 years of experience working for major contractors in the Gulf region, mostly on jobs related to pre-contracts tendering, planning, post-contracts commercial and contracts, cost control and planning. Projects and bids involved includes but not limited to highways, bridges, sanitary and stormwater lines, pump stations, ports, and harbors, high-rise buildings, schools, villas, hospitals, office buildings, oil and gas, underwater oil pipelines and fiber optic cables etc. He has worked as independent consultant for some of the major companies such as Haptor Group, Kia, Carillion, Arabtech, Boran etc. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the practical process of tendering prevailing specially in the Gulf region and how to improve some of the processes to achieve the goals. Now Mr. Farhan will start the webinar.
Hi guys, this is Farhan with you. Thank you for sparing your valuable time, and I hope these few minutes will be worth listening. From this point onward, it will be my voice and not the bot. So let's start. Uh, so what the main target of tendering is to win the projects with maximum profits. And in order to achieve this target, some of the main few points that we must focus on, and I think all in this field are doing so rightfully, is to submit tender on time, obviously. Then submit the tender with full conformance of client's requirement. In order to do that, you have to utilize the resources at the optimum levels. And this is the bone of contention between the owners, the CEOs, GMs, and the tendering department. What resources and what work? And we will discuss that in some other slides later on. Analyze the risk involved in tendering in the projects in the future that due to time constraint we might miss it and lose millions later. Now let us discuss some of the processes involved in the tendering. Uh, we will not go to the nitty-gritty and details of each and every aspect, but some of the features which can help in improving the efficiency of the tendering department. For the sake of this discussion, we shall skip the part of pre-qualifications and our role of business development department. So one of the most important thing that happens in the tendering process is receiving the tender documents. Now, in many companies, smaller organizations maybe where the structure is not set, this 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 part is neglected a bit. Yani, what is the role of document control? All right. Uh, Once you receive the tender documents, you have to make a log what you have received, whether if in the invitation letter the description of the documents are mentioned, and whether the consultant or the client has given all the documents mentioned in that invitation or not. So someone has to check those things. At what date and time it was received. Put the tender number in the log, right? And then, of course, the document controller will also will help in making the historical data. I mean, it could be a document controller or non-technical secretary or a person in your department who can do this thing. Uh, the copying and distribution of the tender documents will be done by this person to the team of the tendering department, senior estimators, quantity surveyors, and of course any filing which is required. I mean, in the technological advancement, we do all the filing in the soft copies, make proper directories to do this thing, and one person should be in charge of handling all these things. So this aspect is neglected in many companies, and might create a problem in the long run. Suppose you get the job in the execution stage, when you're looking for some letters that you have received during the tender stage, or the queries that has been raised, and if you cannot find it, it could be disastrous. Sometimes at the during execution stage, when you are claiming something which for which you don't have a record for it. So please take a notice of this thing, uh, yeah, and like, have a resource for this thing. I mean, there is an additional cost for it, I understand, but this is a very crucial resource that is required. The team under the tendering manager should typically consist of senior estimators, junior estimators, civil, and electromechanical estimators, plus a procurement staff, a person who is sending inquiries, getting quotations from the subcontractor suppliers, a planner, all right, and if it is a bigger department, then a contracts guy should also be available under the tendering manager. In some companies, some of the roles are shared. For example, the procurement department is separate, and the procurement feed in the quotations, and they send the inquiries and get the quotation for the tendering manager. And similarly, planning is separate and it is shared. But from my experience, the ideal situation should be that all of these resources should be under the tendering manager's role. In You can have I have written an article in my website. You can have a view of it if you wish. And this is not the topic right now, but this is the ideal situation where I believe that the tendering manager should have the complete control over all these functions required to submit the confirming tender and on time. So the structure of this department plays a very key role in making the correct decision. Now, generally, the CEO or the GM or the owners of the company, they don't want to skip any tender that comes in the market. So, whether you receive the tender before consulting the tendering manager, or you have a pre-qualification available for a tender, I think senior management must bring the tendering manager on board before bringing any tender to bid. So the decision of bid or no bid should be made, and a process must be introduced to initiate it. This will solve many problems if the tendering manager is available on board, because he is the most experienced guy who understands his team, his structure, their workload, and the problems comes when tendering resources are not enough to do the bid as it should be done. Some of the factors involved to take these decisions of bid and no bid could be as follows. Goals of the company's yearly turnover. This will help to evaluate the target of the winning amount, maximum and minimum limit of bid value, which can be handled by the company if project is awarded. So the operations team should be involved, or operations manager should be involved in this kind of foresight for how many tenders, how many projects he can handle in the coming year. Capacity of the tendering department to handle a specific size of project, number of tenders in hand. So these two, as I've discussed before, also it all depends upon the size of the tender department, the ability of the team that the tender managers is handling. So the tendering manager or the pre-contracts manager should really be involved in the process of choosing the bids that he has to tender in the coming month, or the coming few months. Then, I mean, there are other factors also involved. For example, the client's reputation in the market. I mean, if the client is not good at payments, or you have a bad work history with the client, and you are always you should be able to drop that bid. Now I just like to discuss this little bit of the workload, which some of the maybe the owners of the company or the CEOs or GMs were not directly involved in the tendering process might not know the workload of a tender. I just briefly touch on what are the things that's being done or should be done in a tendering process. So, starting from the manager's role, basically, once he received the tender document, he should note few main things in a tender. For example, the location of the project, the client, which means the client's history, payment terms, his dealings with the other contractors. What is the submission date? Whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, how many tenders he has on his table, whether he will be able to submit the tender properly, pre-tender visit meetings, dates, venues that he needs to send his staff for these kind of meetings. What type of contract he is dealing with, lump sum, remajored, FIDIC. I mean, in one of the previous slides, I shared that the team should involve the senior estimators and planners and procurement guys. I think I missed the quantity surveyor's role, the takeoff guy. Lump sum jobs or remajored job, both require some kind of takeoff to be done. So it is always advisable to have an in-house resource to do these kind of things. At least to check the major items, rebar, concrete, earthwork, for example, in infrastructure tenders. Payment terms, performance bonds, retention, what are the terms? Bid bond, coordinate with the finance department to issue the bid bond. What is the percentage of advance payment bond? The risk, of course, that is a major subject. What kind of risk and a whole list of items that are involved in the risk. And then, of course, the checking the workload and the distribution of the works to the subordinates. So, in a typical workload, first thing that we have to do, whether you are using a specific software to do the bidding, or you are using Excel, even plain Excel. I mean, there are very good Excel users. We should code the bill items. So this coding is very important, especially to handle the mega projects, and it not only helps in preparation of the tendering reports to be reviewed by the senior management at the end of the bid, but also if you get the project, it also helps in cost control activities and the linking it with the cost account and the finance department. So proper coding at this stage is very crucial. Then you do of course, making the vendors packages inquiries to be sent to the vendors, and then the direct works pricing, such as labor plant material breakdown for trades that can be done with in-house resources, such as earthwork, concrete structures, masonry, floor wall finishes, plasters, tiles, etc. Subcontractors quotations entry and conformance check. And well, this is a very huge task again. Now, the dispute always comes that whether it will be done by the procurement department, if it is separate, or it should be done by the in-house tendering team, which, as I said earlier, ideal situation should be that it should be done internally under the management of the tenders manager. Contract review and associated risk, and the indirect works, staff salaries, financial costs, bonds, temporary works, etc. So the staff salaries, again, the org chart of the staff and the salaries should be coordinated with the HR department, and also operations department should be aware of the org chart, and of course I would say the salaries also should be shared, so that they are the one in the end who suffers when the estimators does a mistake in during the pricing. Um, so some of the reports that we prepare is trade-wise total amount. The trade means that you should have a separate total for the concrete, separate for the rebar, separate for the masonry, plaster, MEP works, etc. Ideally, you should have a total separate amount shown as direct and indirect works, and then the man hours and the plant equipment hours. Very useful information if it can be generated through Excel. Well and good. Otherwise, it can be done by a dedicated estimating software. There is escalation, currency fluctuation, and the OHP. One of the factors also that I think I have missed is the technical evaluation of the tender, in which the Ideally, the planner is working in hand with the tendering department plus with the operations department, so that the uh, mobilization factors, location of the cranes, for example, site offices, materials storage, all these things are carefully discussed with the team members to uh, finish the job on time, and also with cost effectiveness factor should also be there. So when we are talking about the starting of the pricing, the importation of BOQ into a computer software, be it Excel or CCS. I have been using CCS since 20 years, so I just mentioned the name of this CCS here, and I'll give you some examples later also that how in CCS these things will be done. So the whole purpose is to show you that how much effort and time is required by the estimators to submit a bid properly. That is the main thing. It has to be done properly. Otherwise, if you have the database, if you have the rates in hand, you just put in the rates and just multiply by the quantity and get the total amount in just 1 or 2 days. That's not a problem, but the we need to avoid the mistakes uh, and the complexities of a project by studying it properly and using a proper estimating software or Excel to finish to price the full bill properly. So coding the bill items is the first thing. Then taking an example from RIB CCS software, they have multiple choice of coding to structure the BOQ in many useful formats. Starting from price and trade codes in the beginning, you may have task codes, group codes, and cost codes also. Group codes, for example, they code the resources in any particular bill. So sources may be the labor, the material, the plant, and then separately subdivided materials could be the concrete separate, rebar is separately coded, and anything associated with the formwork, for example. And then the cost codes, which will be used during the post tender stage, during execution stage. So let me share some examples here. So this is one sample of the CCS or Candy BOQ. So as you see, this is a normal BOQ which you get from the client with the bill description, item number, unit, and the bill quantity. This is the portion we work out the rates, and then this amount is, of course, is automatically produced by multiplying with the quantity. So first thing that we do is we define, before even pricing and doing the rates here, we define this trade codes. We call it trade codes, for example. So these two items are populated. So we have a standard directory for the trades, and we rename it as earthwork. And once the whole bill is defined with the trades, these scores, price codes, are generated for the individual bill items. So one more example, for example, so this is the waterproofing works. So we have the trade code of W here, right? And then if you know this candy system, or if you don't know, but if you have the resource lab, we create a resource library to price individual items. So these are specific resource codes for each resource with the base rates, the market rates which you get from the market. And then these are the codes that you can define here. Again, you have the option of choosing whatever coding structure you like to have it here. So this is again one more example of coding. So if you see this here, that this item, for example, wrapping, has a rate of 4.45 per meter run, and then it has been priced in the bill, and that has brought the usage. So in the whole project, you have 3,358 meter run of this wrapping film. Okay. So this kind of information is very useful when you are finally reviewing the bid, and you have the option of, say, for example, reducing the waste percentage if someone has used a high waste percentage, and ultimately reducing the total cost of the bid. See, so once you have the proper coding done, this is the end rate summary for one typical project. So you can see here, so all the earthwork excavation total amount is 16 million. In that one, how much is the labor amount, how much is the material, how much is the fuel, how much is the plant, what are the subcontractors used for that particular trade. So, and this same information can also be converted just by a click of the button into percentages. So these are basically the percentage with respect to the total amount of the bid. So the again the purpose is to share, how much effort is required for to submit the tender in a proper format, in a proper way. So imagine a BOQ, say for 20 floor hotels with three basements and two podium levels. The scope of work includes all work structures, finishes, and detailed MEP. Number of items in the BOQ could reach maybe 6,000 or more, definitely. Imagine the time required to set up the bill with all the codes appropriately as per the trades. This could easily take 3 to 4 working days for a one person dedicated task. So you can just use the calculator and divide it 6,000 by it, and imagine that one item, coding of one item physically sitting in front of the computer will take how many minutes or how many seconds. Divided by the number of bill items, and you will understand how many, say, 8 hour working day will require how much person to do this job. I was a little bit conservative here actually. Meanwhile, the senior estimators will start reviewing the tender documents before starting the direct works pricing. This includes review of BOQ, related specifications and drawing, etc. Ideally, the subcontractor supplies inquiry package should be made within the tendering department, as I have discussed before. Repeating this cannot emphasize less. Giving a week or so for sending inquiries with appropriate packages, attachments, quotations would be expected to come after a week again. There must be a log of vendors for each tender, meaning what packages were sent to whom, at what date, quotations, receiving date, comments, remarks, etc. This should be discussed on weekly updated meetings with tendering manager. Quotations received from suppliers and subcontractors has to be compared with each other, entered in the BOQ, and their conformance must be checked. Exclusions must be discussed with vendors, and the allowances must be priced and added if using candy. So one of the things that I have noticed is that many companies, they receive the quotation, and the whatever the bottom number is, they just add it in their BOQ during the tender without understanding the dangers of exclusions that subcontractors have made in this quotation, whether it is on the same page or it is behind behind the back of that page. For example, they want the site offices missing. They will not. They will ask you to add site offices charges for their staff and labor. For example, transportation of their labor is missing. So all these things has to be carefully reviewed and has to be either discussed with that subcontractor at the tender stage to be included, or that allowance should be added in the quotation during the tender stage. So there's one example that the candy has a separate package or module of subcontractors. So we bring all one trade of items for a particular subcontractor in one package from the BOQ, right? For example, this one is concrete works. Maybe this is for, I guess, some precast concrete works or something. We have like one, two, three, four, five quotations that we have received, and each subcontractor have some exclusions in it. So we add these exclusions, these small letter that that you see is it means that this is unlinked items. So we add these here in the candy system and analyze this, price it ourselves, so that we have apple to apple comparison with all the four subcontractors, depending upon the quotation that we have received. So this is just a sample. I maybe this subcontract A and B has not priced anything, so this is should be ignored here. This and then these three probably would work in our example here right now. So the direct work pricing, say for concrete frame, flooring and wall finishing, plaster, screed, masonry, etc., can be priced in-house using standard productivity of labor and plant. So if you are using Candy, it will help you organize, edit these variables quite swiftly and can give you a comprehensive report on the total usage of each resource. So now let me explain quickly with some slides here. So taking the example of footing, this is a reinforced concrete in situ item. So imagine that this rate is empty right now. So what we will do is we have a library created in Candy or any other software we are using, which has all these materials listed out before you start the pricing. So for example, we have the rate for concrete and anything associated with the concrete pumping, and we receive the quotation for it. We add the wastage in here, and then the including the material, then we have the labor component. In the same worksheet, we will choose the gangs for that labor to do the job, and allow some productions for each resource, and accumulated cost of that would be shifted in here. So this is just for one item. So imagine you have the items, multiple items for direct works in a standard BOQ, starting from footing to columns to beams to slabs, right, and plaster masonry. So you can very well imagine, how much time it is required for an estimator to finish the job, uh, considering all the specifications and the productions uh, required to price that particular item. So this is like a standard resource library in Candy, and as I've explained before, this is coded. For example, these are the labors, and this is the group code for labors, a specific code for each resource. Again, a sample for say ready-mix concrete items with different strengths, and all of them are grouped into one group code. This is the base rate. So just taking an example of this bricklaying mason. So you have 31,000 hours of that particular mason in a full job. So this usage is very useful at the end of the day. When you have the total labor hours, you can always calculate, work back, how many labors required for a particular project and what kind of trades, and you can create a histogram from this. Same thing happens with the concrete, the materials also. At the end, when everything is being done, you can, this is like just like a very raw sample bit summary sheet in which you can just summarize direct works, indirect works with labor, plant, materials, a contract value, then indirect works, different there's everything has a detailed backup, and escalation, for example, full process is required for escalation, should be included in every bid, and then of course the risk value. And then this would be presented to the main board, tender committee, or whatever you call it, in which you will have you ask cross questioning could be done, and final value is decided. So the conclusion, as I say, that the balance out the workload and optimum utilization of resources to reach the best figure in the above summary. Be selective in your bids. Don't compromise on the quality of submission. Understand the consequences of not hiring the right professional, overloading the best team with the work they cannot perform correctly, skipping the task of reviewing the risk, contract, site visit, client's background, poor or incomplete tender documents, DNB tenders requirements, right? Not willing to spend extra costs in tenders when it is required. For example, EPC, DNB type tenders. If you don't have the in-house team of structural engineers, architects, for example, or MEP experts, you need to, depending upon the size of the project, you need to hire an external consultant to give you a better idea, what is required for these kind of tenders. Um, Not using the right software and opening your bids to human errors of multiplications, wrong carried forward totals and losing millions. This is a reality. This happens when you have a huge workload, when the resources are not optimized properly. It is inevitable that mistakes can happen. Not willing to understand the time and experience required for a dedicated bidding software. Again, this is an expense over it costs for a company, but if it is used, then it will ultimately bring a lot of benefit for the company. Not coordinating with planners to synchronize in with the risks such as impossible time for completion or increasing resources to finish the task in a specified time. Um, and last but not the least, but actually it should be in the beginning, ethics is very important. Ethics means be transparent, be polite, uh, submit your task on time. When you call for meetings, be on time. Give regard to everybody, irrespective of his race, of his nationality, of his language, of his experience. This is not connected to the client, your bosses, the vendors, the subcontractors, your team. Understand their human shortcomings, and as much as T-boys, I mean, you are supporting staff. Uh, Ethics, I think, is the key for successful completion for any project, any task, any bid. So please feel free to comment and contact us for any queries, clarifications, tasks, trainings related to tendering, commercial contracts, and planning. And thank you for your time, and hopefully it will be useful uh, for the contractors and as well as the consultants who do not understand probably or not realize the effort required to submit a conforming bid, and when sometimes they just issue the addendums, without giving enough time for the contractor to evaluate it properly. So thank you very much, and any comments are welcome in all the social media that you have been using. And goodbye.